Hello everyone. In this continuing video, I'd like to talk about making a library from your Ameritrade API. Now, if you need to see the previous video, do check out the link below. Now, before we get started, for some of those who were following along and had trouble, I did realize that the runtime by Google Scripts does play a significant part as to whether the script runs successfully or not. And the previous version of Google Scripts ran on Rhino, and the latest one, Chrome version 8. Now, we found that Chrome version 8 does run into some difficulties, including things like opening the sidebar and running some of the script procedures. So it is best to keep your script version with Rhino. Okay, so if you do see the Chrome V8 prompt, do close it and do not accept it. Now, to recap where we left off, we had created API program within the program A under AMTD functions, and this accessed something that's provided by Google Scripts called user properties, and that's where we kept information like the API key, the bearer token information, as well as the refresh token. And with the function like AMTD functions, if we have more programs, like program B and C, you just copy and paste the AMTD functions file over, and you would then access the same API key and bearer token without having to replicate that. Now, bearer tokens and refresh tokens change over time. So if you run different programs at different times of the week, it needs to access the latest token information. So that's why user properties was a good solution. Unfortunately though, Google Scripts does not work that way anymore. I think they had a new version and deprecated this old functionality because of some security issues. So the original intention of having a common property store that would have all this information that can be shared by the user does not work. Okay, so if you see some of the latest information on Google Scripts website, you'll find that it only works within a program. So this feature of Google Scripts does not work. So to solve this, we're going to need a different approach, and that is to remove the Ameritrade functions from each of program A, B, and C. You notice that they're all missing, and create what is known as a library. And in the library, then it will still access the same three parameters: the API key, bearer, and refresh tokens, and also house all the functions. In this way, when you make a change to any features in the functions, if you improve it, if there's a new release on capability, you can just edit the library function, and it will then work for all the programs that access it. So it's a relatively good strategy. The downside is, and the warning comes from Google, is that using libraries should be done very sparingly, because it does have a performance hit. So do expect things to be slow, so use libraries only sparingly. In this case, I think we are fine. You just have to be careful. If you do ever implement trading functionality, live trading where time is critical, then you may want to rethink this strategy. Alright, so let's now dive in to create the library from our API function calls. So here's the overview of the steps to create the library, and we'll go into it in more detail. So this is just a quick overview. So firstly, you need two files: the library file and the actual file that you will access the library functions from. In the library file, you just go to Google Drive and create a new script file, and I'll show you how to do that. And then you can either create the functions or paste it if you already created it from your scripts. And determine which of the functions in the library that needs to be private. That means that they won't be accessed from outside the library, and they are only intended for use within the library. Okay, and to make it private, you then add an underscore to the function name. Then save a proper version of the file, a managed version. Grant permissions, the read access permission as a minimum. And finally, create a script ID. Get the script ID of the file so that you can share it. Within the script file, go to Resources, Libraries, and there you will have a pop-up where you can add the library using the script ID. Set the development mode. I recommend on for personal use. If you're using it for formal use by more than one person, not yourself, and you need a controlled, managed process of coding and then releasing, then you would turn it to off so that the code versioning would be properly managed. And then determine an identifier for this library, and this will be like a prefix that you add to other normal library calls within Google Scripts. And so, for example, you can put an AMTD. And finally, within the script file, add or replace code that will be referring to these functions, and you would refer to them as AMTD dot the function name. All right. Now here's an overview of the functionality that we have in our Ameritrade API Google Sheets so far. And for those who didn't watch my previous video of how this was created, you're certainly welcome to do that and watch that video. It's a long video, but basically what this sheet does is it allows you to look up the different things from Ameritrade, and this one is where it's calling the price of a share of Google, and also the price of an option for a Google option. All right, and you could change this to other counters, and the price should update as well. All right, it uses the access token and refresh tokens, and that's all recorded down here. In the script that we have so far, we have 3 files. A code file that basically creates a custom menu so that we can authenticate ourselves using a side pane, and the side pane is an HTML file. And this is where the Ameritrade functions are as it is now. So you have your API key here, and if all this is not clear to you, do refer to the previous video or the Ameritrade API guide. All right, that's the API key, and here's where you would put your API key for your API call. And here's the user properties and several Ameritrade functions. These first 2 are to show the pane, the HTML file, and come back from it. And then the rest of it would be to get quotes and get the option price, get the price history, and some of the authentication functions. Okay, so this is where we are starting off, and we're going to create a library to access the Ameritrade functions as a library call. So the first thing we need to do is to create a Google Apps script file. So to do that, go to your Google Drive and go to New, More, and click on Google Apps Script. Now, if you don't find Google Apps Script in this menu, that's because you have not connected it yet. So go to plus here where you connect more apps and search for Google Apps Script. right? And there you can click on that and go ahead to install it, right? If it's not installed. So with that, you do go to add more Google Apps script, and you get a new script file. Here we can rename it. So let's call this Ameritrade API library. Okay. With that done, we can then copy the code that you want to put in the library. And in this case, I'm just going to copy everything for now and paste everything in here. All right, and go ahead and review what it is that I would like to keep. So firstly, these two functions should not be in the library. They are meant for the sheet, so I'm going to delete that. The API key and the user properties should be retained in the library. And all these get quote, yes, keep it here, get option, price, get the price history, all these are all functions for the Ameritrade API. Getting the bearer string, tokens also, oh yes. Finally, here are some utility functions to put tokens. This is to extract the token and to paste it. I'll leave it here for now. Epoch date, don't need that. So you've got, I've done this before, obviously. So I've put a underscore to keep this as a private function. So this function called epoch date will only be accessed within the library, right? You can't access this function from outside the library. So it's a private function. Okay, and you just need to make sure that any references to epoch date within this also has the underscore, the same name. So with that done, then we can save this and go back to the sheets and do the opposite. So here we said we'd keep the first two. I'm going to take away the API key and user properties, keep these first two within this, and I'm going to delete everything else. Okay, so now I've divided all the functions into those that I want to keep with the Google Sheet, and the rest in the library. Okay, so back to the library file then, and now we need to save a managed version of this, and you go to File and Manage Versions, and we're going to create a new version. So we'll say first release, save this as a new version. Okay, and now we have to think about access to the file. So under Share, you can set different permissions. If you are the only one accessing the library and you're not sharing it with anyone, then you should be fine and you can skip this step. Otherwise, you need to make sure you manage permissions. And typically for sharing a library, you don't want others to access it, so you would share it as a view only. So now we need to get the script ID, and you can get that from File, Project Properties, and you can see the script ID over here. Double click that, and you can copy that whole thing. Alright, this is so that you can share this. Anyone who wants to use the library needs to have this script ID. It's like a key. Okay, so you go back to your Google Sheets script, and here's how you add the library. Go to Resources, Libraries, and this is where you can paste the script ID, and you click Add. Right, you see it comes out here. So the things to note is, firstly, you can select the version, and there's only one that we've created, so version 1. The identifier, this is the prefix as I discussed previously, you could make this anything you want. You do not need to keep this the same. And the one that I prefer is AMTD. So if you access any of the library's function, you would put AMTD dot whatever function, right? Blah, blah, blah here. That's how the functions would be accessed. And this is the prefix to that. Development mode, if you need proper managed versions, then you would keep this off. If you're using it only for yourself, keeping it on is much more convenient. It means that as you update the library script, you will automatically access the latest version and you do not need to follow the version control. If you have that off, then you can make changes to your library and it will not get reflected in your calling functions until you release a new one. And the calling script will then need to update the version so that they can access the proper released version. All right. So, but for personal use, I would say keep it on. It's much more convenient. Okay, so prop have been updated. So now we can access the functions in the library. And how do we do that? It would be using the AMTD dot nomenclature. So what I recommend doing is making equivalent functions here so that we can access the library functions. So the first function I would like to add is the getQuote function. And we can see that in here. I would like to access this function, right? AMTD underscore getQuote. Now I can make the same function here, AMTD underscore getQuote. And this is the stock symbol. And here is where I just simply return the library function. So AMTD and the nomenclature AMTD dot, and you can see that it has populated the autocomplete, and you can choose the correct one. Okay, and that's it. So basically this call will access the getQuote function, and if the next one that I would like is to access the get option price, so similarly I'll do the same thing here, AMTD get option price, and you need the same parameters, right? So I could even just do this and just copy this whole thing. And here again, I would just return AMTD dot and this first one. So make sure that the names are same. Yes, exactly the same. Great. Okay, and that should be it. I won't do the price history one just for now, but for demonstration, just these two are fine. Save it. Okay, then I won't show it, but when you're testing it, you need to, of course, replace your key here with your proper API key. Otherwise, of course, the API calls will not work. So I'll do that offline. And let's go to our sheet. So here you can see that we've got errors now in all the function calls. And if we coded it right, we shouldn't need to change any of these calls. They should just work. But we just created a new library, and the library has to have its the bearer token and the refresh token stored in the properties, and it has not been done. So this is the first time that we're going to use it, so we need to authenticate that whole thing again using our authenticate function. That can be a bit tricky depending on whether the functions run correctly and all that. But there's always an easy way to test the function calls, and that is to create a simple function to test everything out. So let's do that. Go to the Ameritrade API and let's add it to the right to the end. Let's make a test function. I will call this AMTD test, and it'll just return hello world. Alright, save that, and inside our calling script we'll do the same thing. And return mtd dot. Now sometimes it does take a while before the functions propagate over, so you might need to refresh, and then you can actually see that in here, but it's not in here right now. So let's try and refresh that. Let's take this away first, save it, I'm going to click refresh. And now you can see it's here, AMTD test. Okay, so that got auto-completed correctly. Oops, this should be AMTD. Okay, save it. And let's go and test it out in our sheet. Equals AMTD test. Alright, so this says that I'm accessing the function AMTD test, which is inside my sheets function. The sheets function is going off to the library, AMTD library, and calling the AMTD test function. That's going out to the library and accessing this. Alright, so this has the library working. As you can see, development mode is on, so that as we update the library, you do not need to manage the versions. It will automatically propagate through. You might need to refresh, you might need to wait some time, maybe like give it a couple of minutes to propagate through the cloud. Those are some of the problems we've seen, where it just takes time for the functions to come through. Try refreshing, and that should normally solve the problems. Also, if you recall, keep it in the Rhino version of scripts and don't update to the latest Chrome scripts. Alright, and I think that's the end. To get all this working, it will be the same as in the previous tutorial, and you can go and do the authentication and all that to update that, and it should all work. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed that. If you got any questions, please put in the comments below, and thank you for watching.